So about 2.5 years ago, we had our battlefield at the New York Disrupt, and a little company called Zenefits got up on our stage and launched. Secretly, or maybe totally explicitly, battlefield companies kind of always hope to come back as speakers. That's exactly what's happening today. Please welcome to the stage Zenefits founder and CEO Parker Conrad and our moderator Matthew Lynley.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
It's been, what, 2.5 years since you were at Disrupt?
2.5 years, yeah. We were a finalist in Startup Battlefield. It's where we launched our product.
Yeah, so it's been kind of a crazy 2.5 years for you. So, like, how did we get here, man? It's been a crazy ride for you guys.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, we've been really fortunate that there's just been a lot of growth, and it kind of started, not right here. It was in the New York event, but I've been just kind of consistently growing since then.
And so, I imagine that your growth is probably the envy of like a lot of people in this room, right? What would you say is like one of the most important ingredients of that growth so far?
I think probably the most important thing that people can do is to set really aggressive goals. So there were a couple times where we as a company sort of sat down and set goals that we thought were just ridiculously unachievable. Sometimes because our board member from Andreessen Horowitz, Lars, really big personality, and he kind of came in. We told him we thought in 1 year we were going to go from 1 million to 10 million in ARR, and he looked at us and we thought we were pretty proud of that. And he looked at us. He was like, "Why aren't you going to do 20? Like why not something like much larger than that?" And we kind of reconvened and sort of asked ourselves, well, what would it take? I mean, it sounds impossible, but what would it take for us to get there? We kind of thought, well, we'd have to split our sales teams in two and hire a little more aggressively on the sales side than we otherwise would, and scale out this kind of stuff faster than we thought we were going to. But we kind of said, well, let's kind of try that stuff and see what happens. And it was working, and so we would just sort of like increase our targets and try and get there.
Yeah, and how big are you guys now?
We're about 1,600 people.
And you guys use Zenefits internally, right? Like, what's that like as you guys continue to scale that product up?
Well, it drives a lot of product development. So we internally we say Zenefits runs on Zenefits, which means like we only do things that are supported by the product and sort of like suffer if it's not. And so we're our own largest customer at this point. So it's pushing sort of the envelope in terms of what the product can do and how it works for companies of a larger size.
And do you have any crazy stories in the past 2.5 years?
Gosh, trying to think. I'm sure there are. I think I think the craziest stories have just been about how quickly we had to grow, and the number of people coming on board, and preparing for a lot of that the growth in customers. It sort of focuses you, because if you at one point I remember we're not growing quite this quickly anymore, but we were kind of doubling in size every 8 weeks for a long period of time in
like
2014.
Recently as well, or?
We're not doubling every 8 weeks right now. It's a little bit not. I mean, that would be rough at the scale that we're operating at. But we were for a long period of time, and it kind of means that every problem that you encounter related to scale is going to be twice as bad in 2 months' time, and so you don't have a lot of time to fix it and address it. But it's very exciting. It focuses the company. It focuses everyone on what's really important. And of course, it also helps attract and retain a lot of talent. So the only thing worse than like growing really quickly is not growing very quickly for a startup. It's a lot worse the other way around, because growth, it kind of feeds on itself. Growth is how startups kind of put a stake in the ground about their vision of the future. It's how you say, listen, we are right. This is the shape of things to come. And it's sort of how you prove that to the world, and that means that when you're growing, there's a lot of challenges to that, but you also can attract all the best people. You attract a lot of capital. You get attention from the press and from customers. And so it's much worse. It's much better. It's a much better state of affairs than the alternative, which is to be growing fairly slowly.
And what's your sales pitch to like engineers and salespeople as you continue to grow?
Our pitch is basically that businesses only have 3 systems of record. They have a system of record for customer information, which is Salesforce. They have a system of record for financial information, which is like Oracle and NetSuite and Intuit for much smaller businesses. And they have a system of record for employee information. And right now there is a gaping hole in the universe for that third leg of the stool. And by the way, we think it's by far the most valuable of the 3 for a lot of reasons. And all of the companies that are successful in these spaces are $50, $100 billion companies. And we think that our growth indicates that Zenefits is a company that is shaped like that hole in the universe. And so our pitch is like, listen, this is a chance to work for a company that, on some level what we do is like dreadfully boring. But in several years' time, Zenefits, I think, will be something that's used by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of businesses around the United States to make life, a little bit easier around this crucial area of, compensation and benefits and compliance and, all this sort of stuff. And that's a fun and really important project to work on.
And why was this an area that fascinated you to begin with?
Well, it's an area that was a real pain point for me personally. So a lot of our product roadmap at Zenefits comes from stuff that I personally just resent and dislike doing as a company founder, even today. So I'm still the only admin in our system. So we have people in HR now, but they actually don't have access to the HR system. And I kind of do all of it myself.
Why is that? Just for practice, or?
Because I'm a little crazy, but mostly it's because it means that I experience a lot of the pain points in the product. So right now one of the things that happens is at our scale we get a lot of employment verification requests. People trying lenders, people applying for an apartment, that sort of thing. And so we're like, every time that happens, I have to like go into the system and help pull that information so that we can respond. And so we're thinking like, gosh, like how do we build like an automated sort of employment verification system that employees can use and do this themselves and like take that work off of sort of HR staff at a lot of companies. And so it reveals to me like a lot of the kind of pain points and a lot of the stuff that is just kind of not fun to be doing.
And you guys deal with some interesting regulatory challenges as well. I mean, from what I understand, you guys are now ACA compliant, or my understanding?
Well, we're launching actually today. We're launching a product which is basically free Affordable Care Act compliance for for all of our customers. And the thing about ACA compliance is it's one of those things where, man, like super boring. But let me tell you, none of you guys want to deal with it. And starting in January and February, at the end of this year, beginning of next year, almost every business in the United States is going to have to start filing essentially a second tax return. So if you think about the tax return as a business that you file today, you're going to have to file a second one with the IRS for your essentially health insurance benefits. And it's something like people are estimating it's going to take most businesses about 13 hours of work a month to do this stuff, and probably about $3,000 or $4,000 a month to kind of cover the cost of doing it. And Zenefits is basically going to do this completely for free, and like we will do the whole thing for you. So we will track everything. We'll keep track of all the data. We'll fill out all the forms. We will file them for you. And
so is this mostly a problem that small businesses have to deal with, or is this something that larger scale businesses also have to deal with?
Well, one of the things that happened, with the Affordable Care Act, and this happens sometimes with government regulation. By the way, I think Zenefits is pretty much the only business in the United States where more government regulation is a good thing, because it creates like more problems that we can solve for our clients. And when companies are doing all this stuff in our system, when you've got your payroll connected up, you're doing your benefits, you're doing time tracking, all that stuff through Zenefits, we actually have all the information we need to sort of handle a lot of this other stuff for you. All of that stuff ends up becoming almost like a protocol layer that we can build applications on top of them. And a lot of those can be compliance related, where we can just handle this stuff for you. For larger companies, they have just armies of people that can handle all of this administrative work. But for smaller businesses, if you're a 75-person company, you don't have someone whose job it is to spend an extra 15 hours a month just like tracking all this boring ACA compliance stuff. And so if you can just give that to Zenefits and make it go away, that's pretty cool.
And that's like one of the big sales pitches for Zenefits in general for smaller companies, right?
Yeah, it's just make all of this stuff that you don't like go away. And really, we think of our sort of mandate as everything that has like a nexus to the employer record, everything that has some tie to employee information, which is most of the core systems of running a business. When you think about it, because we have all that information, all that data in our system, we can just entirely eliminate all these headaches associated with this stuff.
And you primarily work with smaller businesses, but eventually these businesses are going to grow up, right? In theory, right? Do you expect to grow up with them? And if so, how do you convince them to stay with you instead of jumping to other payroll providers or other, HR benefits providers or things like that?
Well, right now our size is kind of 5 to 1,000 employees, but we're much bigger than that ourselves. There's no fundamental break point that occurs at 1,000 employees. It's just that above 1,000 employees, other stuff exists. You can put Oracle in for an HR system. You can buy Workday. You'll spend 18 to 24 months implementing it. So I'm not sure like why you'd want to do that, but it exists. We think that our own size is growing faster than any of our customers, and therefore the functionality that we support is growing, I think, quickly enough that we'll be able to support everyone as they get bigger.
And what are some new markets that you guys look at when you consider how you want to continue growing?
Well, it's really, all of the way we think about it is Zenefits is fundamentally an employee provisioning system. It's like, listen, if you think about how this should work, there should be a button that you click when you want to hire an employee, and you just say, listen, I want to hire John. He starts on this date. I'm paying him this much money, reports to so-and-so in the customer support department. Go figure it out and make everything happen, and we take care of everything, whether it's the getting documents and offer letters signed, getting them set up on benefits, handling compliance, getting them up and running on payroll. And then there's a button when you need to terminate someone that does everything in reverse, administers COBRA, handles all that kind of stuff. And then as things change with the employee, if they get married or have a kid or any of that kind of stuff, all of these systems update automatically. And so the way we think about it is, what are all the places when you hire a new employee? Where do they need to get set up? What's all of the administrative work, not just across HR, but across IT and across other, parts of the organization that someone needs to sort of get up and running, with all these different systems. And that's where we look for sort of products that either we're going to build or that we're going to partner with others to sort of get integrated and connected up to Zenefits.
And so how do you feel about payroll then?
Well, we haven't, so I can't announce anything about like new products or where we might be going specifically. But payroll's a very important spoke. One thing that we think is very important is that we partner with a lot of different payroll companies, and we want to keep those connections open. We want businesses to be able to choose the payroll company that they work with.
And I think, last time we spoke, you mentioned something about it being kind of like plumbing, right? Could you elaborate maybe a little more on that?
Yeah, so I think payroll, payroll is a utility. It's like, I think the analogy I use is like plumbing. And basically, the quality of a payroll system is very binary. Either it works or it doesn't work. And it's either it's accurate or it's not accurate. And if it works and it's accurate, you don't get like special points for it like being like more right. And if it doesn't work, it's like it fails completely if there's even one issue. And so it's kind of like plumbing for a house in that way. Like if you were buying a house, you don't really buy a house because the plumbing is like really great plumbing. But if you have a house where the plumbing doesn't work, it would be a disaster. And so the important thing for us is we want to make sure that there's always like there are always like really solid payroll systems that clients can use with Zenefits. But we think that the differentiator is not it's not at that layer of the stack. Like payroll is a check cutting and tax filing service. And the differentiator is about the applications that you can build on top of that to make people's lives easier.
And so you've ridden this, again, you've ridden this kind of roller coaster like growth. What would you recommend for people in here in terms of running a business and things like that?
I mean, it sounds really cliched, but hiring good people early. There's never been a hire where we stretched on the amount of equity that we were going to give them, or the amount of compensation that we were going to offer, that we ended up regretting. Like, there were a lot of times where we're like, oh my gosh, like, this is going to be expensive. Like, should we really go there? And every single time when we've done that, and to bring in really top quality people, earlier, even at times earlier than we thought we needed them, every single time we turned around, 3 months later, and we're like, oh my God, I'm so glad. We're so glad that we did that. I don't know where we'd be today if we hadn't made that move.
Do you have a good story behind that?
Well, I mean, for me, I think when I started Zenefits, I was probably, I think I probably was very, I kind of thought, listen, we're just going to have engineers and salespeople, and what are all these other functions? Why do you need them? And I was very naive about that. It was a long time before we had really solid, finance team in place. I've been wrong every step of the way in terms of all of that stuff. Every single one of those functions, I look back and I'm like, man, I wish we'd really invested in finance earlier. I wish we'd really invested in product management earlier than we did. All of the things that we were sort of a little bit late. Now you can't do everything at once, but in retrospect, I wish we'd started all that stuff sooner than we did.
So what would you advise everyone to not do as they're running their companies?
To not do. I would probably worry a lot less about dilution than most people do. I'd focus on getting the right investors in very early on, raising more money than you think you need. We ended up. I started a company before this where we really struggled to raise money, and we were told no by every VC in Silicon Valley and pretty much every VC outside of Silicon Valley as well. And so I always erred on the side of raising a little bit more than I thought we needed at every round, and we always ended up finding sort of ways that we could use that to sort of accelerate growth or invest more and stuff like that.
And so how do you deal with this new onslaught of competition, with people like ADP coming after you and things like that?
I mean, I think there are a lot of companies that are, either pivoting to sort of focus on our approach to the market, or there are a lot of new companies that are starting. And I think it's, on some level, it's flattering because I think everyone, sort of a lot of people are sort of acknowledging that this idea of sort of an all-in-one system, whilst previously a lot of these different systems were disconnected, which created a lot of headache for employers, that this idea of an all-in-one system is the right approach to the market. And so you see a lot of people adopting that kind of marketing messaging and that kind of branding, sort of in some sense a reflection of what Zenefits has done in the marketplace. I think there are going to be some enormous advantages to scale in this market, both more broadly in terms of being the system of record for employee information, but also even just on the health insurance side. We've gone out, and it's taken us a long time, but we've built real electronic interfaces with all the major insurance carriers out there, and that means we can transact electronically when almost everyone else is having to deal with this stuff on PDF and over the fax machine. And I think it's going to be, we can do that because we are the largest source of new business for, almost all the major carriers in California, and probably most of the major carriers nationally now in terms of the amount of new clients that we send them. So they're very willing to sort of build integrations with us and do stuff like that. And I think it's going to be a long time before other companies, can get to that kind of scale where they can do the kinds of things that are going to create, a more integrated and better product experience for their clients.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Thanks a bunch, Matt.